I'm Eleanor, 30F. My life has been complicated. I'm also pregnant, and now I'm staring down the barrel of a divorce, possibly the worst one imaginable. To understand the current dumpster fire, you need some backstory. My childhood was straight out of a gothic novel, only with more money and less charm. My dad disappeared when I was little. Vanished. One day he was there, the next he was gone, leaving my mother, Beatrice, and me behind. The official story was that he went on a business trip, but the suitcase he took was empty. No one ever saw him again. Beatrice never recovered. She became brittle, cold. She blamed herself for Dad leaving, and, subtly, she blamed me too. Apparently, having a child sucked the spontaneity out of their marriage, scared him away. She provided for me, of course. Private schools, riding lessons, summers in Europe. I never lacked for anything material, but affection? Forget about it. She was emotionally stingy and emotionally brutal at the same time. Every mistake, every perceived imperfection was met with a razor-sharp remark, a sigh of disappointment, or that chilling silence that felt worse than any yelling. I grew up feeling like a disappointment, like I was never good enough. As soon as I turned 18, I bolted. I packed everything I owned, drove across the country, and never looked back. I went low contact with Beatrice. I needed space, a chance to breathe without the constant pressure of her judgment. That low contact didn't last long. A few months later, she showed up unannounced at my college dorm. I was dating someone then, a sweet, unassuming guy named Ethan. Beatrice proceeded to tear him apart. She called him unambitious, questioned his intelligence, and basically made it clear she thought he was beneath me. Ethan, bless his heart, tried to be polite, but he was visibly shaken. Needless to say, that relationship imploded soon after. That was the last straw. I cut her off completely, restraining order and everything. The words I spat at her as the process server handed her the papers still ring in my ears. I don't care about your money. I'll make my own way, and I did. I worked my butt off, built a career, and finally started to feel like I was in control of my own life. At 25, I met Arthur. He was kind, funny, and grounded. He wasn't intimidated by my past, and he saw something in me that no one else had. We fell in love. Hard. We got married 2 years later, in a small ceremony with just a few close friends. Beatrice naturally was not invited, but like a black cloud, she still managed to cast a shadow. She found out about the wedding through a distant relative and tried to contact me, violating the restraining order. I refused to answer. She left a series of increasingly frantic voicemails, begging for forgiveness, claiming she'd changed. I deleted them all. I genuinely thought I was free. I'd built a wall between myself and her toxic influence. I was wrong. Terribly, heartbreakingly wrong. Fast forward to the present. Arthur and I were happy. We had a comfortable life. Maybe not lavish like the one I grew up in, but it was ours. And then, the best news ever, I was pregnant. We hadn't been actively trying, but we were ready. Or so I thought. Arthur was over the moon. He was excited, planning names, talking about nurseries. It was beautiful. For about a week. Then the shift happened. Subtle at first. He became distant, preoccupied. He started questioning whether we were really ready for a baby. He talked about our careers, the sacrifices we'd have to make. He even suggested termination. He said we could try again later, when the timing was better. I was floored. This wasn't the Arthur I knew. The man I loved would never say something so callous. We argued. A lot. I tried to reason with him, to understand where this sudden change of heart was coming from. I refused to consider the alternative he suggested. I clung to the hope that we could work through it, that this was just a temporary blip, a moment of panic. I was wrong again. One night, I woke up and Arthur was gone. Vanished. Just like my father. I found a note on the kitchen counter. It was short, cold, and utterly devastating. He was filing for divorce. He claimed that the pregnancy had made him realize we were fundamentally different people, that our goals in life no longer aligned, that staying together would be a mistake, a trap. He couldn't face the prospect of being stuck with a child. I was numb, betrayed. The man I thought I knew, the man I'd built a life with, had revealed himself to be a stranger. A coward! I agreed to the divorce. I contacted a lawyer. It was terrifying, facing the prospect of raising a child alone, but the alternative, staying with someone who clearly didn't want me or our baby, was unthinkable. Then, a week after he left, Arthur showed up at my door. He looked haggard, desperate. He kept saying he'd been manipulated, that he hadn't been himself. I almost slammed the door in his face, but something in his eyes, a flicker of the man I used to know, made me pause. I let him in, and that's when he dropped the bombshell. He told me about Beatrice, how, shortly after our wedding, she'd contacted him, how she'd offered him money, a lot of money. He claimed she wanted to be a silent guardian, ensuring my happiness, that she'd been making regular payments into our joint account for years, money that we'd both been spending, assuming it was the result of his wise investments. He said that when she found out about the pregnancy, she panicked. She told him that a child would ruin our marriage, that I would end up resenting him. She threatened to cut off the payments if he didn't deal with the situation. That's when he became so cold. When he suggested the unthinkable, when he walked out, he said he'd realized he'd made a terrible mistake, that he loved me, that he wanted to be there for our child. He begged me to take him back. I shut the door in his face. I feel sick, used, betrayed. I hate that I've been living off my mother's money without even knowing it. I hate that Arthur was so easily bought. I hate that my mother, even from afar, is still trying to control my life. I don't know what to do. Part of me wants to believe Arthur. Part of me thinks he's just saying what I want to hear. My friends are telling me to be practical, that I need the help, that raising a child alone is too difficult, that I should forgive him for the sake of our baby. But I don't know if I can. Can I ever trust him again? Can I ever truly be free of my mother's influence? The overwhelming consensus is that I'm NTA, not the Ashel, that both Arthur and Beatrice are massive AHs, that I should run, not walk, away from this toxic mess. And you know what? You're right. I am going through with the divorce. I'm furious. I'm hurt. But most of all, I'm determined. Determined to build a life for myself and my child, free from manipulation and lies. A lot of you suggested financial planning and resources for single mothers. I appreciate it. I'm not comfortable sharing my exact income, but let's just say I've done pretty well for myself. I was raised to be financially independent, and that's a lesson that stuck. I'll be okay, even without Arthur's help, or rather, Beatrice's help. I had a rather unpleasant conversation with my friends who were advocating for reconciliation. When I told them I was sticking to my guns and divorcing Arthur, the floodgates opened. Suddenly, I was being unrealistic, stubborn, and emotional. They trotted out all the tired cliches about needing a man to raise a child, about how hard it is to be a single mother. It was awful. It felt like I was transported back to the 1950s. I realized that their practical advice was rooted in internalized sexism. They couldn't fathom a woman succeeding on her own. I shut them down. Hard. I told them that I was perfectly capable of raising my child without a man, and certainly without a man who'd been manipulated by my mother and asked me to. Well, you know. They didn't take it well. We're not exactly on speaking terms right now. Honestly, though, I feel a sense of relief. It's like I've finally cleared out the clutter in my life. I did talk to Arthur. I called him this morning and told him my decision. I laid it all out, how disgusted I was by his behavior, how betrayed I felt, how I couldn't trust him anymore. He got hostile. He accused me of being ungrateful, of throwing away a good thing. He said I was being naive and short-sighted. That's when I lost it. At least I didn't disrespect my spouse and talk to their insane mother for a handout. I yelled, "Grow up and realize you were a dick for leaving, and I'm not taking you back." I slammed the phone down. He hasn't contacted me since. Honestly, I don't know what Beatrice is up to. She's still under the restraining order, so she can't contact me directly. And Arthur, bless his heart, not really, doesn't seem to have any insight into her schemes. I was hoping the divorce would be smooth and amicable. Just sign the papers, divide the assets, and move on. But something tells me this isn't going to be that easy. I have a sinking feeling in my stomach. And I was right. Today, I went to meet my lawyer to finalize some paperwork. He looked grim. "Eleanor," he said, "Arthur has retained counsel." That wasn't necessarily surprising. But then he dropped the bomb. He's hired local area's most expensive and ruthless divorce attorney. My jaw dropped. What? Why? We agreed on everything. It's an uncontested divorce. My lawyer sighed. It seems he's changed his mind. He's now claiming financial hardship. He says he's entitled to a larger share of our assets. I stared at him, dumbfounded. This was insane. Where was Arthur getting the money for ruthless divorce attorney? He certainly didn't have that kind of cash. Then it hit me. Beatrice. She's still pulling the strings. Even through a lawyer, she's determined to make my life a living hell. She's using her money to punish me for rejecting Arthur, for rejecting her. I'm beyond furious. I'm terrified. What is she trying to accomplish? What does she want from me? Part of me wants to break the restraining order, to confront her, to demand answers. But I know that's a terrible idea. It would just give her exactly what she wants, control. So, what do? I'm considering reaching out to my Uncle Charles. He's one of the few family members I still talk to. He's always been a voice of reason, a grounding force. He's not on good terms with Beatrice either. In fact, they actively avoid each other. But I haven't told him about any of this. Not the pregnancy, not the divorce, not Beatrice's involvement. It would be a massive shock. I've always kept my distance from that side of the family, trying to shield myself from her influence. But I'm desperate. Okay, so I did it. I called Uncle Charles. It was difficult. I haven't really spoken to him in detail about my life since I cut off contact with Beatrice. We've exchanged pleasantries at holidays, the occasional birthday card, but nothing substantial. I've always been afraid of dragging him into my drama, of making him choose sides. But last night, staring down the barrel of a messy, expensive divorce orchestrated by my mother, I realized I had no other options. The phone rang 3 times before he picked up. "Eleanor?" He sounded surprised. "Is everything all right?" "No, Uncle Charles," the first said, my voice shaking. "Everything is not all right." And then I told him everything. I spilled it all out. The pregnancy, Arthur's sudden change of heart, the divorce, Beatrice's secret payments, the ruthless lawyer. I didn't hold back. I just let the words tumble out. A jumbled mess of anger, fear, and exhaustion. He listened without interrupting. He didn't judge. He just let me talk. When I finally finished, there was a long silence. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. "Eleanor," he said finally, his voice grave. "I had no idea. I am so sorry." He said he understood why I hadn't told him sooner. He knew how much I wanted to protect myself, to avoid getting caught in the crossfire. Then he said something that surprised me. "I've always suspected Beatrice was still interfering in your life," he admitted. She's a very difficult woman. She doesn't understand boundaries." He told me that he'd seen glimpses of her controlling behavior over the years, even after I moved away. Subtle manipulations, veiled threats, attempts to influence my decisions from afar. I felt a chill run down my spine. I wasn't just being paranoid. My mother was still trying to control me. even after all this time. Charles asked me what I wanted him to do. I hesitated. I didn't want to put him in a difficult position. I didn't want him to risk his relationship with Beatrice, however strained it might be. I don't know, I stammered. Maybe just find out what she's up to? See if you can get any information about her plans for the divorce? He agreed without hesitation. I'll do whatever I can to help you, Eleanor, he said. You're my niece, and I won't stand by and watch Beatrice ruin your life. He warned me that it wouldn't be easy. He and Beatrice weren't exactly close. In fact, they actively avoided each other. But he said he'd find a way. He'd use his connections, his knowledge of her personality, to get to the bottom of things. He ended the call by promising to keep me updated. Now I'm waiting to hear from him, waiting to find out what my mother is planning. I feel conflicted. On the one hand, I'm relieved. I'm not alone anymore. I have someone on my side, someone who understands Beatrice and her manipulative tactics. On the other hand, I'm terrified. I've just dragged my uncle into a messy, potentially dangerous situation. What if Beatrice finds out he's helping me? What if she turns her wrath on him? And even if he does manage to uncover her plans, what good will it do? Can I really stop her? Is there any way to truly escape her control? I'm starting to wonder if I'm making a mistake. Maybe I should just cut my losses, settle the divorce, and try to move on. Maybe it's not worth fighting her. Maybe I'm just fueling her obsession with me. But then I think about my child. I think about the future I want to create for them, a future free from Beatrice's influence. And I know I can't give up. I have to fight. So, Reddit, 8ITIA for involving my uncle in this mess? Am I putting him at risk? Should I have just tried to handle this on my own? I'm second-guessing everything. Okay, you guys are not going to believe this. Uncle Charles is a master of deception. I honestly don't know how he did it, but he managed to worm his way back into Beatrice's good graces. Apparently, he used the classic estranged family member seeking reconciliation tactic. He called her, apologized for past grievances, whatever they were, I don't know, and suggested they meet for lunch to clear the air. Beatrice, of course, was suspicious. But Charles played his cards perfectly. He acted contrite, vulnerable, and desperate for her forgiveness. He even hinted that he was having financial troubles and needed her guidance. It worked. She agreed to meet him. According to Charles, the lunch was excruciating. Beatrice spent the entire time talking about herself, her accomplishments, and her concerns for my well-being. She subtly fished for information about my life, asking veiled questions about my career, my social life, and, of course, my marriage. Charles played along, feeding her carefully crafted lies and half-truths. He pretended to be sympathetic to her plight as a mother who just wanted the best for her daughter. Then, he dropped the bait. He casually mentioned that I had contacted him, seeking advice about the divorce. He acted like he was torn between his loyalty to Beatrice and his desire to help me. Beatrice couldn't resist. She pounced. She launched into a tirade about how I was being stubborn and ungrateful. She claimed that Arthur was the best thing that had ever happened to me, and that I was making a huge mistake by divorcing him. Then, she revealed her true colors. According to Charles, Beatrice admitted that she had been paying Arthur all along, not just after the wedding, but for years. She said she wanted to ensure that I had a stable and secure marriage, that I wouldn't end up alone and miserable like she did. She claimed that she had carefully vetted Arthur before the wedding, making sure he was suitable for me. She had even manipulated events to bring us together, subtly steering me in his direction. I felt sick to my stomach. My entire relationship with Arthur had been a lie, a carefully orchestrated charade engineered by my mother. But the worst part was yet to come. Charles said that Beatrice admitted that when she found out about the pregnancy, she panicked. She saw it as a threat to her carefully constructed plan. She believed that a child would ruin our marriage, that I would become resentful and unhappy. So, She told Arthur to deal with the pregnancy. She threatened to cut off the payments if he didn't comply. That's why he became so cold. That's why he suggested the unthinkable. That's why he walked out. Beatrice believed that by forcing Arthur to leave, she could push me into a corner, make me desperate enough to reestablish contact with her. She thought that I would eventually come crawling back, begging for her help. And now, she's using the divorce proceedings to punish me for defying her. She's paying ruthless divorce attorney to drag things out, to make my life as difficult as possible. She hopes that by making me miserable enough, she can force me to come back to her. Charles said that Beatrice seemed genuinely convinced that she was acting in my best interest. She believed that she was protecting me from a life of unhappiness and loneliness. It's twisted. It's insane. It's Beatrice. Charles recorded the entire conversation. He has it all on tape. I'm reeling. I don't know what to do with this information. On the one hand, it's incredibly damaging. It proves that Beatrice has been manipulating my life for years, that Arthur was nothing more than a puppet. On the other hand, it's also incredibly disturbing. It reveals the depth of my mother's obsession with me, her complete lack of boundaries, her twisted sense of love. I feel like I'm drowning. Charles thinks I should use the recording in court. He believes it will give me a significant advantage in the divorce proceedings. It will prove that Arthur was acting under duress, that he was being manipulated by Beatrice. But I'm hesitant. I don't want to drag my family's dirty laundry into court. I don't want to expose Beatrice's mental instability to the world. And part of me still hopes that I can reason with her, that I can make her understand the damage she's causing. But deep down, I know that's probably wishful thinking. So, Reddit, what do I do? Do I use the recording in court? Do I confront Beatrice? Do I just try to walk away and forget about all of this? I'm lost. Okay, everyone. After a lot of soul searching, a lot of sleepless nights, and a lot of support from you guys and Uncle Charles, I made a decision. I decided to use the recording in court. It was a difficult choice. Part of me still hesitated, still wanted to protect Beatrice from public scrutiny, but I realized that I couldn't let her continue to control my life. I had to stand up to her, not just for myself, but for my child. My lawyer presented the recording to the court. He argued that it proved Arthur had been acting under duress, that he had been manipulated by Beatrice into filing for divorce and making unreasonable financial demands. The judge listened to the recording with a look of increasing disbelief. When it was over, she was visibly shaken. Arthur's lawyer tried to argue that the recording was inadmissible, that it was obtained illegally, that it was irrelevant to the divorce proceedings. But the judge wasn't buying it. She ruled that the recording was admissible and that it clearly demonstrated Beatrice's undue influence over Arthur. She stated that Beatrice's actions were reprehensible and borderline criminal. The divorce settlement was quickly finalized. I was awarded full custody of my child, along with reasonable alimony and child support. Arthur received a minimal share of our assets. After the hearing, Arthur approached me. He looked defeated, ashamed. "Eleanor," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "I'm sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen." I looked at him, and for the first time, I saw genuine remorse in his eyes. I realized that he was just as much a victim in all of this as I was. "I know, Arthur," I said. "Just stay away from me. Stay away from my child." He nodded and walked away. I haven't seen him since. As for Beatrice, she hasn't contacted me. I don't know what she's thinking, what she's planning, but I'm not afraid anymore. I filed a new restraining order. This one even stricter than the last. I've also taken steps to protect my finances and my privacy. Charles has been a rock throughout all of this. He's been my confidant, my advisor, my friend. He's helped me navigate the legal complexities, the emotional turmoil, the constant fear of Beatrice's interference. I'm starting to rebuild my life. I'm focusing on my pregnancy, on preparing for the arrival of my child. I'm surrounding myself with supportive friends and family. It's not easy. I still have moments of doubt, moments of fear, moments of overwhelming sadness, but I'm getting stronger every day. I've also started therapy. I need to process the trauma of my childhood, the betrayal of Arthur, the manipulation of Beatrice. I need to learn how to trust again, how to build healthy relationships, how to protect myself from future harm. Someone in the comments pointed out that Arthur was apparently dating someone new soon after the divorce. Honestly, I don't care. If he's found someone who makes him happy, good for him. I'm just glad to be rid of the toxic situation, and I'm certain about who I date in the future. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know this: I'm finally free. Free from Beatrice's control, free from Arthur's lies, free to create my own destiny. Thank you all for your support. Your comments, your advice, your words of encouragement have meant the world to me. You helped me find my voice, my strength, my courage. I'll post updates as things progress, but for now, I'm going to focus on myself and my baby. Wish me luck.